Good afternoon, good noon, and thanks for being here. So we'll start the sessions today, and we have very interesting subjects and very interesting topics to hear on, and we'll have eminent speakers amongst us. The first one, we all take decisions, whether in business, in life, in various ways for many reasons, and we use data. Sometimes our gut feeling, as we call, our experience and so on, right? But how about taking a decision which is based on all this and where these intersect? So amongst us, we have Mohit Arora, and Mohit is going to talk on telltale signs of superior decision making, balancing data, experience, and intuition, and taking decision on that basis. That's going to be very interesting. And to brief you about Mohit, he's a partner of Mondriaan Group in Singapore. He has flew in from Singapore, by the way. He engages with management teams of group companies in identification of value creation strategies, develop, monitor, and deployment of the plans. He was earlier Vice President of JD Power Asia Pacific Singapore. Mohit, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Yeah.
And a request, we will have, after 20 minutes, we would have about 17 minutes as your presentation.
Sure.
Or if you wish, even 15 or 16 minutes, how you wish.
Sure.
And then followed by some questions and answers. Okay?
Okay.
And you would have a timer to get started now.
Yeah, the time is already on.
Over to you, Mohit.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right, very good afternoon to all of you. And first of all, let me start by saying that I usually so I think I would request all the backbenchers to just come in the front in the next 30 seconds. It would just make my life easier. Otherwise, I can just come down there and talk to you from there itself. As I said, usually I don't bite. Okay, excellent. So let me start, when we look at, quickly introducing myself, I think, to briefly tell you what and who am I and what do I do. Well, basically, Mondriaan Group is a private investment company. We basically work with, most of the automotive solutions providers at this point of time. From Singapore, of course, our reach extends to Southeast Asia and India at this point of time, looking at technology providers, advisory companies, performance improvement solutions providers. So basically, as I think, I was just introduced, my background is automotive. So I talk to you a lot about the automotive case studies, as you might say, but I would also try and contextualize it with some of the things that you guys may be facing. So who am I? Well, somebody that you chose to listen for about 15 minutes, I would say. So very briefly, in terms of what do I do? Very simple. I try and make money, and I ensure that people that I work with also make money. That's good. And that's good. So that's a very simple introduction. In terms of how I do it, very simple. I try and look at the decisions that we make on an everyday basis. It's not that I am running those companies. It is just that I am trying to ensure the decisions that the people and the leaders in those companies are making are kind of in the right direction as far as. So let me start very simply putting, at this point of time, when we look at the decisions that we make, really make us the person that we are today. So it's not the genes, it's not the education. Yes, they all contribute, but frankly speaking, it is the decisions that we make, on a daily basis that truly make the individual we are today. So in terms of looking at, what this gentleman Eisenhower said, that we are essentially, the freedom of choice is truly the most important freedom that an individual has. So while yes, you cannot choose where you were, to this world, but everything else and most of the things thereafter, at least in our living life, govern, what we become. So in terms of looking at choice, let me start with a quick exercise. How many of you have Netflix at home? Very few, okay. How many of you do online shopping? Okay, fantastic. So when you have to shop for a particular product, how quickly are you able to decide on your choice? And I will make it simple for you. Again, as you know, I came from JD Power, so we all believed in rating scales. It's a rating scale of 1 to 10, where 1, you have no problem in deciding, and 10, well, you could take months, years to decide. So let me see, with a quick show of hands, how many of you are in 1 to 5? Okay, so that's about 1, 2, 3. Can I just keep your hands up, please, so that I can quickly count? That's majority, about 80%. How many of you are between 6 to 10? Okay, excellent. So there are about 7 or 8 people. Well, people who said 1 to 5, can I see your hands again, please? Okay. I have good news and bad news for you. Okay? The good news is that probably you are pretty happy with the decisions that you make, but the bad news is you are not so good a decision maker. Okay? Now the other people, who are the other ones? Okay, now the good news is that you probably make better decisions, but the problem is that you are never very happy with the decisions you make, because you are always thinking that there is probably a better choice that could be available out there. And that essentially is the biggest challenge that we see when we look at decision making. There is a limit of time, and I will come back to both of, because these two guys were sitting right in front, but I will come back to this issue as we go along in the presentation. So what is decision making? Very simple. It's a choice that we make in terms of the alternatives. There are certain alternatives. There are certain criteria that are out there, and basically looking at the overall objective which we are trying to achieve. Now, criteria could be time, money, application, as the thing may be. Okay? So in terms of these 3 things, we need to understand that when we look at choices, it becomes extremely complex. Should I be going outside the country? Should I be expanding out? Should I be building a team? Should I do an outsourced model or an insourced model? So all kinds of choices exist when we look at our daily lives, our corporate lives, our organization's life. So when we look at the paradox of choice, and it's very interesting, let me just go back up here. When we look at choice out here, when you have very few choices, you know, the biggest, you know, you are not really, you know, there is, in terms of looking at what we call as a degree of confusion, or the fact that you are not very happy because you want something more. Many of you are shopping, right? Now, if there is, what did you buy last? Laptop. Now, if you imagine there was only one kind of laptop available on the store, you are not really very happy with that point, right? So you want more. But imagine if there were 5,000 kinds of laptops available. So what happens again? What happens when you have 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 types of laptops? I know, we filter, but basically the way it goes is that the degree of confusion, when there are fewer choices, you're not happy and there is confusion because you want more, right? But when there are too many choices, you are again confused, okay? So essentially, looking at the overall trend here, the comfort zone basically lies somewhere in the middle, where you have a reasonable number of choices, and anything to the left or anything to the right, you are either sad or confused. So how do you know that you have enough? Okay, this is one of the biggest things when it comes to decision making, that you have the requisite number of choices that are there to work with. But the second challenge that you see, apart from the element of choice, is what we call as, you know, the whole concept of time. When we look at making choices, if I am looking at, you know, something which is farthest off, I see a lot of young people here also. If I am deciding about my retirement plan 30 years or 40 years down the line, it is extremely difficult to totally understand what my requirements at that point will be. But if I'm deciding for something which is for tomorrow morning, what will I wear, it's probably easier. So it is more like the game of archery, as I say, because the longer that you have to shoot, you have to understand that the accuracy that you will get is proportionately reduced. Okay? So in terms of looking at the choices that we have, time to be one of the biggest challenges that we have to address. So looking at most of you, as you know, I think many of you are running your own organizations. I met some of you. Some of you may be working on a daily basis in a large company. So looking at the kind of complexity that exists, right from the base level where you're looking at operational management, right to strategic management, you would have a situation where there is a lower risk to an area where there could be a significantly higher risk in terms of the kind of decisions that you make. The other challenge that you get is what you see on the axis below on the right. There are certain decisions which are routine decisions. They are very repetitive. But many of you, as I read your cards, name cards, CIOs, founders, chairmen, those decisions are where you are in the space of unstructured decision making. When you're looking at unstructured decision making, you are largely looking at a situation which is causing greater amount of stress. Now, the challenge that I see when I work with many of the SMEs is the fact that as an SME, you are constantly moving up and down on this axis, moving from structured to an unstructured space continuously. And sometimes we end up treating decisions here like what we should be treating them there, and the other way around. And that is, I would say, one of the biggest limiting factors when we look at the challenges that come to an SME. So in terms of, if you really look at the issues that we just talked about, whether it is the number of choices, the issue of time, the issue of bandwidth, the issue of understanding, the biggest element that comes out in decision making is uncertainty. So when we look at uncertainty, it is not that it's a new puzzle. So how have people really addressed it? Well, decision making has been there as long as humans have been around. And if you really look at it, it has been a combination of three things: intuition, experience, and data. What I have plotted on the right, if you can see, is basically the number of times this word has been used in the lexicon over the last 300 years. If you look at intuition, it has probably been there all along. Experience is something which has been growing, and when you look at the use of the word data, in the sense of data, as we know it today, it is something which is a past 50-year kind of a phenomena. So it is not to say that data was not being utilized in the past. There was information that was being used, but the concept of data as we know it today is something probably which is more of a recent occurrence. Let me talk very briefly about all the three for a moment. When we look at working with intuition, you are driving down the road, it's a nice, clear environment, there is nothing to bother about. Yes, if you have to make your decisions and a deer passes by, you could react. But how do you use intuition when you have to drive on a road like this? The number of variables, the number of unknowns that are there today in any kind of a decision-making process, it resembles more a scenario that you see here than the previous one. So clearly, our brains have a limited processing power, and at this point of time, looking at the kind of changes that are out there, intuition clearly may not suffice. Working with experience. That is the second element that we talked about. Now, again, as I said, I come from the auto industry, so I'll keep giving those examples. When you look at driving in front, and if you were to look at the rear view mirror continuously, you can't drive in front. And there's a big reason why auto manufacturers around the world provide a much larger windscreen and a very small rear view mirror. Because you have to drive forward and not necessarily keep looking at the back. And that's really the point, that when we are driving our organizations, we need to ensure that the proportion of our rear view mirror is more or less in the same proportion as what we have for an average automobile, where the windscreen to rear view mirror ratio is clearly reflected or monitored. The other challenge is that, when we look at life, yes, when we are, as we grow older, we hopefully get wiser. But the other thing is that if you're not making all your decisions towards the end of your life, there are many decisions that you are making really upfront. So as I said, when you look at the case of an archer, you are, or for that matter, anybody else, the distance that is available in front of you and the unknowns that exist at that point of time, you need to account for a lot more. And like an archer, if you shift even a micromillimeter, you could completely miss your target, especially when the arrow is going over a much longer distance as compared to when we are much closer to our goal. The third is working with data. And of course, there are significant positives. There are areas, data helps us chart, unknown areas. Data helps us work with situations where people are unfamiliar. There could be new people who may be coming into the organization. We may be going into areas which are unknowns. So again, data helps. But data also comes with a challenge. And that's basically when we go into a situation of analysis paralysis, where we are trying to get data so that we can make that perfect decision, okay? And we end up collecting more and more data. In my previous company at JD Power, we used to do a lot of work in terms of bringing consumer data to organizations, whether it was for product development, whether it was for retail improvement. But essentially, one has to understand that all of this, if it does not result in an action, it's meaningless. So that basically brings us to the fact that when we look at all these three parameters, while all three of them are important, none of them truly suffice the objective of decision making. And there's always a bit of a leap of faith that one needs to make. So how do we do it right? In my experience, I think aiming right is very important. And as I think this particular example shows, if you aim just on your line of sight, you will miss your target. So it's always important to aim a little higher, okay? Because that's when you will really hit your target well. So aim right, aim a little higher than your immediate line of sight. Condition your intuition. I mean, this is again something many of our decisions that we do on an everyday basis or take on an everyday basis is something which is just based on intuition. How does our intuition or our brain get conditioned? Keep putting it into areas which the brain is unfamiliar with. Because conditioning really happens when the brain becomes familiar with a particular situation. The more that you can bring them out into areas which are outside your comfort zone, the more your brain, as an individual and as an organization, will become more effective and functional. Collaborate when possible. Yes, of course, in all your organizations, you could be a single decision maker, or you could be having groups of people who could be deciding for you. Let's understand, there are extremities possible in both cases. You would have a situation where you become the single dictator, and this could also transpire this side, but you could have also an abject, chaotic situation making the organization not move forward. A couple of last points. Understanding that, when you are looking at organization decision making, it's extremely important to understand the value system that is your own value system as a founder, as well as the value system of the organization. You could look at all the data, intuition, and experience. It needs to get aligned to the values that you have. And that truly builds a long-standing organization and success. Invest in the right listening tools. I mean, I keep giving this example often. It's not to say that the umpires never made a bad decision, but the kind of information, tools, and technologies that came up, even for a smaller outfit, made decision-making better. And as you can see out here, this is just a very quick example. Nearly 30% of decisions that were made in the past were incorrect. As you can see, the wrong calls, and these were well identified when you have a technology tool like the DRS in play nowadays. Decision making is not the end of the journey. Decision making is when you say, I am going to do something. Organizations will be truly successful when you actually start implementing the decision. Implementation is therefore the key. Understand what data you need. I mean, again, as I said, the single arbiter of success, in my opinion, is not the financial performance. It is basically ensuring that you have customers who keep coming back to you again and again. Data helps manage uncertainty. Data helps bridge gaps in experience. Intuition and experience help bridge the gaps in data. And last, data helps in building intuition and experience, and all three together is basically what, if you are using them in the right balance, help you succeed and anticipate the future. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take those.
So my question is like, when you speak about intuition,
Right.
that's everybody, or every one of us may be perceiving it in different way,
Right.
based on our own core values and all.
Right.
But when you said about improving that, do
Right.
you have any suggestions to for all of us?
Right. So I mean, the way intuition works is basically it's a situation of conditioning. So you know the way if you are in the same environment again and again, your short-term memory transfers itself to the long-term memory, and thereby the reflexes which govern it. The only way it changes is when you upset your mental hormone level to ensure that the brain starts to, rethink and condition itself again and again. For example, if you look at the Navy SEALs. Now, Navy SEALs typically have to go through a process where you are under pressure, you are in uncertain circumstances, and you need to make quick decisions, okay? So in order to manage, and the information that is available could be there, but could be limited and could be wrong. So essentially, what you need to do in your mind is to expose yourself, force yourself to experience those situations. And the problem is that a part of our mind tells us that let's not make an effort. Human body is like, let's conserve energy. So you have to take yourself out of those situations, force yourself into areas where you are forcing the mind into an unknown world. Because that's where the mind starts to rethink, and the comfort hormone kind of goes behind, and the non-comfort, the action hormone kind of starts to take it over, okay? This is once you start to do it on an ongoing basis, and what I have found is leaders who are able to do this successfully are truly, eventually understand one thing: experience and data can lead you to a particular place. But when you look at intuition, many times it could be that bridging, element that helps you really get across to the next level. I hope that answers part of your question.
Some of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe we can talk later on this one a little bit more. Okay. Any more questions, please?
In the first slide, when you asked, how early you take the decision,
Right.
And is there any point where, or any like say in break-even point where it is the perfect decision would be?
Look, my usual take on the decisions that we make, because as a founder, it also depends on your risk appetite, your own value system, let's put it like this. I cannot make mistakes. I want to take the perfect decision. Frankly speaking, I don't know if there is a word like perfect decision, because it's better to kind of take that leap once you are 80% confident that, the next step that you are taking for your organization and any decision that you are taking, long-term product development plans, for example, okay, you are 80% confident that this is the right step. My only guidance factor to you is that go with trends, and that's the element of data. Go with trends that are basic cohesive trends, okay? For example, again, going back to the auto industry, electrification is a universal trend. It's a singular trend, okay? That's the way world will be. In terms of people, the singular trend is that there will be more people tomorrow than there are today, at least for most of the bigger markets that we see. So the thing is that if we can tie ourselves with universal trends, if we can be 80% confident that we are, what we are doing, the decision that we are taking today is likely to hit the point, aiming a little higher probably, you should be good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We can take some questions offline. Thank you, Mohit, for sharing your insights. Very useful indeed. Especially the paradox of choice was something which I was very interested in knowing, and I think you have shared very well on that. You know what I had heard that how you can be more successful. So I was told by my boss then at that time that you have to make right decisions. And then how do you make right decisions, I asked. And he said, well, you have to make some wrong ones as well for that, right? So, of course, that's where the experience comes in, but you have shared amazing insights, especially how, experience, intuition, and data can be used in the right proportion, the right time, for the right decision to be made. Thank you so much, Mohit, for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
We have a memento for thanks to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Please come, Ranjan.
Thank you. Oh, wow, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. This is
Just amazing, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Wow, this is great. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just take this.
Thank you. Sure. That was really super start. Did you all enjoyed it? Fantastic.